been a crazy week for a lot of us, but I'm glad that we're all able to be here for another Junior Developer Happy Hour. Welcome to everyone whose first times is this week. And I can go through just so people know, whoops, I knew there was something I was missing. So while I'm looking up the Slido link, I know that yeah, this is just an AMA, like ask me anything, ask us anything. And Sam and I started this meetup in the springtime when COVID hit and everything was getting crazy with the job market, because both of us recognized that it already is tough trying to get into tech and get your first job, like as a dev, if that's what you're looking to do. And then with crazy financial times, it just gets crazier. So we wanted to try to support you all as best we could. And this is our little way of doing that. So anytime, if you have any questions, the best place to post questions for us to answer, I think I saw, oh, awesome. Thank you, UL, for posting the FAQs. And there we go, Brian. Thank you. Brian just posted the Slido link in our Zoom chat. So that's the best place to post your questions, and then you can upvote the questions that you're most interested in getting answered, just so we can be most efficient with our time and yeah, get to the stuff that most people are interested in hearing us talk about. And then if you are able to stay until the very end, that's when we invite people to come off mute and we can have more of a more natural conversation. And I'm going to also just introduce myself a little bit. I'm Brady. I'm a software engineer at Nordstrom. I am a full stack engineer, like mid-level. And I work on, if you've heard of Trunk Club, Nordstrom absorbed Trunk Club to be part of Nordstrom. And so we're like subscription service, kind of like Stitch Fix. I work on just the onboarding part of that app, and really mostly have done front end work the past year or so. So like React, TypeScript, stuff like that. That's enough about me. I will let Sam start talking now.
Hey, how's it going, everybody? So I'm Sam. I am a software engineer, focused mainly on front end for the past few years. Been doing software engineering for about 7 years. I went to Dev Bootcamp in early 2013. I also have a computer science degree that I got a long time ago during the dot-com bust, and I gave up looking for a job like pretty quickly. So that's kind of why we started this too, because that was like a mistake I made. Like I just gave up and I didn't get a job as a developer till like 11 years later. I didn't even keep programming. I just like completely stopped and just did something else. I worked in the mortgage industry for a while. But yeah, super long story. But I worked at a bunch of different companies, small startup, and all kinds of different companies. Tried to help my friends start a startup, contract work. So a lot of different experiences. I was most recently at Lyft building internal tools for the mapping organization. Is all front end mostly, React, TypeScript, little bit of Node.js. Yeah, that's my background. Right now I'm in Tulsa. I just moved to Tulsa. I joined the Tulsa remote program. And yes, it is a Wu-Tang shirt I'm wearing. Wu-Tang is for the children. But yeah, what was I saying? I'm in the Tulsa remote program. It's a program, they pay remote developers, or not developers, remote workers. You don't have to be a developer as long as you can do remote work, or if you have a remote job. They pay you $10,000 to move to Tulsa, just to come check it out. They're trying to build a community here, of like just skilled remote workers. So far the community is great. I'm in their Slack I did not start the program yet. I have orientation next month. So after that, I'll be here for at least a year. So that's what I'm doing. And then I'm taking a sabbatical right now. I was planning on working on this meetup, just seeing what else we can do besides AMAs. Mostly we've done AMAs only so far, but now I have a lot of time. So I'm gonna experiment with all kinds of stuff. We'll see where it goes. But yeah, and then coming up, Brady's been booking us up. She got all kinds of stuff going on this month. Next week, we got Leanne. She's coming back for people that were here for her last one. She did an AMA with us. Leanne Edwards, she's a career coach at App Academy. And that was a really popular one. So we asked her to come back. She said instead of an AMA, this time she's gonna do a presentation. So that's next week. She's gonna do just how to kickstart your job search. She's I guess she does that with a lot of people. So she's gonna come do it for our community here. And then you can check the meetup page. There's a whole bunch of stuff coming up. I'll drop my LinkedIn link if anybody wants to connect. And then I'll let Jerry introduce herself. That's our guest this week. What's up, Jerry?
What is up, Sam? Hey guys, thanks for having me. I'm Jerry Gerou. I went to Dev Bootcamp in 2017, graduated on Cinco de Mayo. I believe we had beers that day. Yeah. And Alex Origitano was in my cohort and she's nodding. So that's what I was looking at. Hey, girl. So been doing this for almost 4 years now. Before that, I'm old. So before that, I had a career. It wasn't really a career. I went to school for art and creative writing. And then out of college, sort of did odd jobs, did some admin jobs, did some QA jobs, landed working as customer support at a company called Wisant here in Chicago. And I was there for just over 6 years. And the coolest part about working there was I went from customer support into a finance role there. I just feel I'm all over the place. But the coolest part about working there was working with the engineers. So if like a new tool was needed or we needed to like figure something out for the customers with the applications or for the finance stuff that I was involved with, we worked really closely with the devs and they had like the coolest job. They just get to build stuff all day. So that's when I got excited about coding. I didn't really know what that meant. I took an HTML, CSS class and I was like, okay, cool. And then I didn't realize that wasn't really coding. And then I just kind of jumped into it and decided to do Dev Bootcamp. It worked out. It was a little slow starting for me. I'm a slow learner, so I'm not sure it was necessarily the best environment for me to learn in, but it got me to where I needed to be. So yeah, so after Dev Bootcamp, I started working at a company called Mac and Mia, which is no more. It was like Trunk Club for babies. And after that, I went to a company called Edovo that does educational and communication services for incarcerated individuals. And I just actually left that job. I took this week off and I'm starting another job tomorrow, which is super exciting, guys. Thank you for catching me in my interim. Yeah, I think that's a good intro. I thought it went well.
I loved it.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, that was awesome. And for the people, I see some people signing up for the Slack. So I guess some first timers that are here. Make sure you check out Virtual Coffee channel. That's a channel where you randomly get paired up with somebody just to meet other people in the community. And the invites are going out tomorrow. So sign up today if you want to get an invite. It pairs you up randomly on Monday mornings. All right, let's start the AMA.
Very good. Yeah, also one last plug. I posted it a minute ago and it's already kind of gone, but this is the YouTube channel that these meetups eventually get posted to. And anyone who hasn't subscribed, if you'd like to help us out, it wouldn't cost money, but it is helpful. If we can get to 1,000 subscribers, we can start monetizing, and then we can put money back into this community, whatever we get from YouTube. So that's that. And I see some questions in our Q&A. So first question here is, what do you think set you apart from others from your boot camp that enabled you to get a job first?
That is a great question. So I've been doing a lot of thinking about this because Brady, you reached out to me and you were like, you were the first one to get a job. And I was like, yeah, but it sort of feels like I don't necessarily think I did anything that extraordinarily special. The company that I got hired for was at our graduation presentations. So after and we had like the list of everyone who was coming, like all prospective employers who were coming. So I went through and decided who I wanted to stalk after the presentations were over. And so I just went up to the two devs that were representing that company at the time and just like talked to them. And I remember one of the questions I asked, it was just such a noob question. I was like, what's your favorite programming language? Like, it didn't matter though, right? Like, you just need to be there to make an impression and make a connection with people. And then after that, went through the interview process, but it was a fairly easy interview process, honestly. I think a big part of what got me the job was more my personality. That sounds awful, but like, I feel like, well, it was, because like, I'm going to talk through this as I think through it. But I think as long as you're
Uh-oh, did we lose her?
Can you guys hear me?
Now I heard that part.
You froze for a second.
Okay.
We got, as long as you're...
I think as long as you're, wish I knew what I said. Just yourself and make them like you. Honestly, I feel like just making a connection with people and making it seem like you are, not making it seem like you, but be the fun coworker that you're going to be when you get the job. So I think it was making the connection with people, making sure they remembered me, and then just try to be as relaxed and normal as you would be. Because if you're like all pent up and nervous, like, I don't know, I feel like just try to be confident and just be yourself. That's what I did. I was myself.
That's
So
awesome.
You weren't nervous? You weren't nervous during the interview? Like,
oh, come on. Everyone's always nervous during the interviews. I'm nervous right now. Like, absolutely nervous. But I think I've learned this more in the other interviews I've been, like, how many interviews has everyone been in? Like, it's a million, right? And like, I've had like 3 successful job interviews because I've only had 3 jobs. But I think a lot of it is also the people that you're interviewing with, and if they, like, what are they looking for? I think it's important to look for people who you want to work with also, right? It's a 2-sided thing. So I don't know, try to find that that magical connection. It feels like dating now that I'm talking about it. But yeah, of course I was nervous.
We frequently compare stuff in interviews to dating, and like looking for a job is just like looking for a partner.
Yeah.
There's a lot of similarities. That's why. Like, do you remember how many interviews like you went on before you got your first job?
Well, that was the first one. So like, I didn't even, did I interview? I don't even know if I interviewed anywhere else. I don't think I did. I think it was just that. It was like one and done.
Awesome.
But when I was trying to leave that job, there were a lot. Like, we could have like a whole AMA about like terrible interviews.
Why did you decide to leave? Are you willing to share that?
Yeah, I can share that. No, that's totally fine. It was an engineering team of 3. And so it was not, and the other, so we had like one mid-level engineer and then me and another junior. There was another person, but he left not that long after I was there. So I just needed to get to a bigger environment, somewhere where I can learn from more senior devs. Yeah.
All right. Was there anything like that you consciously did to try to remain calm, like to not appear nervous, or was it just kind of like you somehow managed and you're not really sure how?
No, dude, I totally appear nervous all the time and I call myself out on it. In my basically in all of my technical interviews, I feel like I'll be like, we'll sit down and I'll be like, listen, this is my worst nightmare. And I literally just say, this is my worst nightmare. I'll do the best I can. Just give me a minute. Like, just be, I feel like if you just own it and you're upfront about how nervous you are, I like that better than pretending. I don't try to pretend.
I do that too, because even though I've been developing for 7 years, and I still get nervous in interviews. Like my hands shake when I try to do like the coding challenge. Yep. And I always tell them, I'm like, sorry, I can't type that fast. Like my hands are shaking. So I'm always upfront about it too, because I don't want them to be like, why do you type so slow?
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, next question in here. How would someone who's pursuing a coding career and a second career as an actor, how would they properly represent both on LinkedIn? How would they represent both? Yeah, on LinkedIn, and how could that prevent them from getting a coding job? Very specific question.
That is a specific question. I'll give my answer, but I'm interested in what you guys think too. So I'll start with the last part. How would that prevent you from getting a coding job? I feel like if people think that your interests are split, maybe they don't think that you're as dedicated as they would like you to be to being a coder. Man, does LinkedIn let you do 2 different profiles? I feel like they don't. That'd be cool though, right?
I made, you just have to have a different email address, I think.
Yeah. So that's an option, I guess. I don't know. But I feel like you can put all of that on there. I don't know. You guys should talk.
Yeah, that's a tough one. I don't know. Do you got any advice on that, Brady?
I agree. I think based on my experience interviewing people, we really like it when people are really, really interested in code. And I mean, I don't have any experience trying to get acting gigs at all, so I don't know what's involved in that. It also sounds like a pretty time-intensive process. So maybe it would be a really good idea to have a separate profile.
Yeah, that's definitely gonna make it more difficult, I think, if you're like, because it's 2 totally different things. You would have to make a really good portfolio or something, I think, just to show that you like are really good at coding. Because usually, the company, they want you to be like focused on software engineering if you're applying for a software engineering job. Otherwise, you can still like freelance and stuff. That's a way to do it if you're just gonna split. But like, when you're looking for a full-time job, that might make it difficult if it's like very clear that you doing 2 different things at once, totally different things.
I see Courtney keeps on saying that LinkedIn does not allow 2 different profiles. So I guess it's something that you would want to look into. But also another comment that I'm seeing is our guest from last week, Nicholas Feitel. He came from acting and then became a dev, so he might be a really good person to talk to. Yeah.
But did he say he's still doing acting though? I don't think so, right? I forget.
I also forget.
Like he might just be focusing on software engineering now. So
He would probably know better than any of us three, though.
yeah, he can hit him up on LinkedIn, Nicholas Feitel. If anybody has his LinkedIn handy, just drop it in the chat.
All right, I guess we can move on though. Here, this next question is: what skills would you suggest to learn to stay relevant in the field?
Anything. Just pick something. I know that's a shitty answer, but like just pick something. Anything that interests you. I think that like you'll get the most out of finding something that you're personally interested in, because it's going to make it easier for you to want to learn it and give you more motivation to doing it. Before I started my last job, we used React, and I like bought a tutorial class, and then it took me like a year before I even like finished it. But once I started doing that, it was just like, it's addictive. Like once you find something that you are just excited about learning, like learn it. I don't think there's, I feel badly because like I know that you want to like know what the right thing to do is, and like what the right answer is, and what you're supposed to do, like what's the perfect cocktail for preparing yourself to find a job. But I don't think that there is that. Because I was Alex Rigitano again. She and I were talking earlier this week. I'm gonna quote you because I flippin' love this quote. Let me bring it up real quick. She was like, advice comes from context, and it comes from other people's context. Like you can take as much advice as you want, but like everyone, it's coming from like my story. It's coming from someone's story, and that's not going to be your story. So you sort of have to craft your own story to like take everything that everyone's saying, but like make it your own. So I would just say like find a technology you're passionate about, because like that's a so like something I have on my website and my like personal LinkedIn. I don't know why I said personal LinkedIn. It's just my LinkedIn. Are like projects that I've worked on, and I would like to build that out more, but like those are very helpful. Like take a tutorial, do a project, do anything, and just sort of like showcase that you've done something, showcase that you've learned something, because I don't think employers necessarily care what it is. They just care that you're interested and you want to do something.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Also, like when once you do get interviews, if you're excited about stuff you've been working on, it will probably show. Your excitement will probably come out in the interview, and that's what the employers like. They like when people are excited about. Like I interviewed people at Lyft for front end positions, and the way we started the interviews is to talk about a project they recently worked on and what technologies they're excited about and stuff like that. Before we jumped into the coding challenge, that's what we talked about. And like, I could tell when people are excited about like whatever they've been working on. And then, yeah. So,
yeah, the excitement always shows through. It's always good. Cool. We can move on. Do you work for a big, or well, did you work for a big company or a small one? And how was it? Did you like it?
Both of the companies I worked for were small, and in different ways. I personally like smaller companies and I like startups, and it's kind of a double-edged sword. I like it because you get to be involved in a lot of things, but also you have to be involved in a lot of things and you have to wear a lot of hats. But I think I like the hustle, and I think I like that everyone is there and like has to be passionate about what we're working on. And I feel I've worked at larger companies, not in this field, but in other fields. And I feel there's just like there can be just a lack of enthusiasm about the work. So I personally like small companies. Everyone's enthusiastic.
Have you felt like you've been able to have a decent work-life balance working at smaller companies?
Yes. Why do you ask that?
That's like my impression. I know like Trunk Club was a mid-sized startup when I joined it, and they were getting much more stable by the time that right around the time when I joined. And I just heard a lot of stories about Trunk Club in their younger years about not being so stable. And it seemed like people just had to be ready to be on call a lot more often. And I guess I see us going more corporate, and it means we're more stable, but I also feel like things were more like relaxed when I joined, which was fun.
I think it just depends on the company culture. It's not necessarily the size of the company. My first full-time job was at a tiny startup. I started in the co-founder's living room. I was the first dev they hired, and they were always like telling me to go on vacation. They're like, you should go on vacation. So, and I would come into work at like 11 o'clock in the morning. um, so there was a good work-life balance. So it just depends on the company culture, I think. Because I've worked at all different size companies, and um, it was good to get different experiences at all of them. Um, but if I were to get another job like later this year or next year, I might think about going back to a small startup. Um, I kind of miss it. It was more fun. It was more like going and hanging out with your friends. But again, it depends on the company culture. Maybe I just got lucky. Um, but yeah.
Cool. That was just my own little follow-up question I threw in there. Okay. So, oh gosh, next question here is, do you have any tips on how to get into flow state when coding? Like maybe is there a favorite music you listen to or any other ideas?
Um, so I'm gonna go back to like do something that you're super interested in, because that makes it really easy to lose yourself. There are like some really cool playlists on Spotify. I feel like there's one called like Brain Food, something like that. There's also some like cool like like there's one like Space Synth. Like I don't know. If you put just something on you can ignore and then you start doing something you're really interested in. Yeah, that's my only advice.
I developed a routine. So to help me get into flow state, I would start every morning by drinking coffee by the window, and then I would like go on my computer and check Twitter and stuff. Like I wouldn't start working for like an hour. I would need like the caffeine to like go through my body. And then I would check email. So I did all that kind of stuff before I started working. And then like before I like was in the mode to like start working, and then um that kind of helped me get into my like work state because it was my routine. It was like my body knew this is time to crank stuff out.
Yeah, I think having like a ritual or having some sort of trigger is helpful. I noticed, unfortunately, I think I need to get a new replacement, like the earphone part of my big headphones. I notice when I was in the office, I needed to put my noise canceling headphones on because it was an open office plan. But then that also has become my trigger for like, now it's time to focus. Just having the pressure of the headphones on, I don't necessarily have to listen to anything. It's like, now it's time to work. And I've heard other people like will have a candle at their desk, and when they're going to be working, they have the candle on, and it kind of helps just psychologically. You start to trigger, you notice like, oh, the candle is burning currently, I need to be working. Having little triggers like that might be helpful. Okay, next one. What are some technical problems with working on an app at work that you don't get to see as much as a student with just your school and personal projects?
I think the experience is just a little bit different. Technical problems that come up at work require a lot of investigation, I feel like, and a lot of like looking at logs and digging into the code, and it just brings up like more specific instances of what the just more granular problems than I think you would have if you were just spinning up a new app, like where there's hopefully like no existing problems, right? Like you're building it from the ground up. So I feel like going in and being in everyone's code at the same time and not understanding how everything is written and trying to track down what the problem is. Did that answer the question? I just feel like it's like more, there's like, less, there's like less, you just kind of have to go in and sort of like try to take it all in and figure out what's going on.
That's a great point. Yeah, it took me a long time to figure out how to read through all this source code, because it was like this huge project that I was jumping into when I first started that I had no context on. So yeah, reading and being comfortable not knowing what's going on and trying to figure out how to piece it all together because it's all broken up into different files. Okay, next one here. What technologies are you, including Sam and Brady, excited about for 2021?
You guys want to go first?
I'm thinking.
I really like Next.js. So yeah, everybody's saying that in the chat. And it really seems like everybody's jumping on that train. It's just really awesome. it just makes everything way easier when you're building React apps. And I mostly do React. I haven't been coding this since I quit Lyft though. So I've just totally taken a break. I mean, I just moved to Tulsa, so I've been taking a break. But besides Next.js, I'm super into Bitcoin. So I'll probably dabble with some of the open source Lightning Network projects, which is a second layer of Bitcoin, which is more for like streaming payments, micropayments, stuff like that. It makes a totally new way to interact with the internet, because there's no way to do micropayments before, and now you can stream fractions of a penny, and people are doing it for podcasts and stuff like that. So if you want to support the podcast that you like now, there's a platform called Sphinx Chat, and they're testing it out with some podcasts, so you can just pay a fraction of a penny for every minute of the podcast that you listen to, just because you want to support the people doing the podcasting. That's just one example. There's a lot of projects going on, so that's probably the thing I'm most excited about.
Yeah, I think, oh gosh, I've got a lot of stuff that isn't necessarily new in 2020 or 2021 that I'm excited to work more with. I have heard a lot about Next.js, and I would like to dig into that. But I still haven't worked a ton with like GraphQL yet. It was looking like we were going to get more exposure on my team to that sort of stuff, but I don't think we will in the next couple of months, at least 6 months. And I'm still working. I'm getting more interested in testing, and like React testing library is really cool. So that might be something that I look forward to learning more about for 2021, but I don't necessarily have a brand new technology to talk about.
Yeah, I don't have a new one either. Guys, I had never even heard of Next.js until you guys started talking about this. I feel like I am not great about keeping up on like what the new sexy thing is. There's the next thing like I'm personally going to work on is another React tutorial using Gatsby. So that's the thing that I am focusing on next, but that's not necessarily because it's 2021. That's just like what I'm excited about next.
You should pivot to Next.js. Next.js is gonna kill Gatsby. The death is already started.
Okay. I'll pivot. Thank you.
That's just my opinion. That's what seems like happening. Gatsby raised a bunch of money, and then they had a lot of like drama at that company, and Next.js is just steamrolling them right now. Vercel is like, their team is blasting and doing a really good job.
Do you guys feel like there's like a risk though in like just learning the new thing because it's the new hot thing people are excited about?
I mean, it's gonna keep changing, but right now Next.js is like, it makes building apps way easier. Like, you get performance out of the box. They just make your React app super performant and easy, and it's full stack. Like, you don't have to, you don't need no JS anymore. You can just do your Next.js, and it will do. You can do your API endpoints and everything all in Next.js, and it's not as clunky as Gatsby. I haven't used Gatsby in a while, but in the beginning, like the way they do like the GraphQL stuff that they have built in, it was kind of clunky. Next.js is like super easy. And like Lyft is all in on Next.js. And I talk to companies like, because I still have a lot of companies reach out to me, and I talk to some of them just to see what they're doing. And most of the companies that I've talked to, their stack is Next.js.
Something you both were talking about. Well, I think your question, Jerry, it also reminded me of another thing I'm excited about, just continuing to learn. I feel like JavaScript is so crazy. It's there's just so much to learn about JavaScript, and I'm wanting to just improve my JavaScript, just like vanilla JavaScript, because exactly like you said, it's stuff like Next.js. You don't know when it's going to change and not become popular anymore, but the stronger the base level of knowledge for JavaScript, I think, is only going to help. And that's like, I mean, most of it is exciting.
Most of it is just JavaScript. Like, learning Next.js is, you don't have to learn that much. Like, the Next.js API is pretty simple. So it's not like, it's not a big risk. Yeah.
Shall we move on? All right. From your experience, what kind of technical questions can junior devs expect in an interview? Will they ask things like binary trees, graphs, dynamic programming?
Man, you never know. You never know what they're going to ask you. I've never had anyone ask me about binary trees, which is probably great. I feel like in my interviews, it's been mostly, and like as a junior and then just going into like mid-level, I think most of the time people want to know, they just want to see that you can like talk through a problem. And most of the ones that I've seen have been like data structure questions, like, here's a list, like order it in this way, and here's a list, and can you pull out the ones that like all have the same whatever, non-repeating letters or something. Like, I feel like that's what I've mostly seen. And so it's hard, right? Because you want to like prepare as much as you can before a technical interview. I even had like a technical interview recently, and I knew the problem before I went into it, but I had to like talk through it and solve it fresh in front of someone. And I don't feel like I didn't do that great. Like, I could have done better. That's me being hard on myself. I still got the job, it's fine. But like no matter how much you prepare, it's mostly just like what I tell myself. I'm not telling you guys, but it's like, calm down, Jerry. Like, you can only do the best you can do, going in with what you know. And it's mostly about talking through the problem and like letting them see your thought process. So I don't necessarily, when I'm getting ready for like technical interviews, I don't necessarily focus on like what like algorithmic problems they're going to throw at me. However, I have had like, it depends on the position too, because I went into like, if it's front end or back end or full stack, like they will definitely drill you on like HTTP protocols and like how does active record actually work? And I was like one of my answers was like, I don't know, you press .save and it works. Like, I don't know. And like that, I didn't get that job. But so, but also I think what matters is like, if you go into an interview and you do the best you can and you explain, you talk your way through the problem, like that should be enough for them to see like your qualities about how you're going to perform on the job. And it shouldn't be a pop quiz, and it shouldn't be a like you didn't finish the problem, you didn't get this right. It's like it's more important that they see you thinking through it than if you actually finally get to an accurate solution. So just like talk your ass off, right? Just like keep going through it.
Yeah. From an interviewer standpoint at Lyft, it was mostly about communication. What kind of questions the person asks? Did they even ask any questions? Like the main thing I wanted to out of the interview, I wanted to understand what the person was thinking and doing the whole time. So it's about good communication. Like, I didn't care about as much if they like finished the problem. So, and yeah, Yoel said in the chat, a lot of string and arrays. I agree with that. For front end, especially, mostly data structures and algos is mostly strings and arrays kind of questions. I as well, in my 7 years, I can't really think of many instances where it was something harder than that. Like, I had some tree questions, but that was at Google. And it was disguised. It was something about parsing like the HTML, like the DOM, because the DOM is a tree, right? So, and that was for a front end position. So that made sense that it was a tree question regarding something with the DOM. But yeah, as far as like dynamic programming and stuff, I don't think that's very common, especially front end, unless maybe at FANG companies. At least in my experience, I've never had to do, I don't think I've even had to do like breadth first search or depth first search kind of. I can't even remember ever doing that in a interview. Something like binary search will come up all the time though. Like, it will be, that will be like the best solution for whatever. It will be disguised in some type of problem that you're doing. Like, what's the most efficient way to like find this number in the array again? So like, it's mostly strings and arrays. Reverse a string, palindrome, like anagram, all that kind of, those are like common like interview questions. And the best thing to do is to practice. So like Pramp is really good. We talk about that all the time. There's interviewing IO. There's a whole bunch of different resources out there.
And I love what you said, Jerry, about just like talking yourself down and being like, they want to know the thought process. Sam also underscored it, that just like communication is more important than anything. We had a guest on a couple weeks ago. I don't think she even went into how amazing I thought it was. She was really nervous about the technical interview part, and I was saying that I was reminding her that you've got the, like, you're trying to find the good fit for both sides, and um, the best you can do, if it might be to just explain the problem and talk through how the problem goes. And she was able to pseudocode everything and never got started on coding in the interview. And I mean, it's not going to be every single company, but she got the job just because she was able to talk her thought process through. Some companies that wouldn't be enough, but it worked out really well for her and what she was looking for.
Oh, and Megan mentioned hash tables in the chat. Forgot about that. The answer is usually hash table, right? That's like a joke because that's kind of true. Like if it's like a data structure, like what data structure you should use. Hash table comes up a lot. I use sets a lot. It's one of my favorite data structures. So that in addition to like arrays and strings kind of problems.
All right. We've got a lot of variety in our questions this week. This next one is, how do you start to work on open source projects that you're interested in?
Brady, I'm gonna have to kick that one to you, because I will admit I've literally never worked on an open source project. I feel like we were all told we're supposed to do that, and I get that it's great experience. And I like watched a YouTube video that you had the other day, or not the other day, I watched it the other day, but it was this whole thing about you talking about open source projects, and I've literally never done one, so you could talk.
Yeah, so I also unfortunately have not worked as much on open source as I would like, but the video that you're talking about was going to like civic hack nights, and from there, like the people that are interested in coming to code together for free for society are probably going to be the type of people who are really eager to help other people learn. And so if you're able to find some sort of civic hack night to work on open source something, that is typically a really welcoming environment to go work at. That's typically what I tell people. I know there are other places online like WordPress. I think wordpress.org. It's not a very straightforward way to figure out how to join their Slack group and get started, but I was blown away. I was trying to start working on some of like improving WordPress, and I joined their Slack group, and somebody just on their own reached out to me. They're like, hey, I see you're new in this Slack channel. Is there anything I can help you with to get started? So if there's any time you can find a Slack group to correspond with some sort of open source, that could be really helpful too.
Yeah, and I would suggest just finding stuff you're interested in, coming back to that, like we was talking about earlier, because then you can probably find some kind of open source project around something that you're interested in, and then you're just more excited to work on it. If you're, you can also just make your own open source project. I have a repo where I made this like geocoder, and I made it because the component, it's a React component, and there didn't exist like a React geocoder to use with Uber's library. Uber's library is called React Map GL. And I searched and there wasn't anything. So I was like, I'm just going to make this. And then it got kind of popular. So that's the open source project I've worked on the most, is my own. But like other stuff, I mean, I've worked on Bitcoin projects and stuff like that, just because that's my interest. So I like mapping stuff. So yeah, if you like an organization, just stuff like that, that's how you can like find open source projects.
Sam, also, you started a different repo. I think there might be a channel for the repo, and you were hoping to just kind of see where the app or see where the repo went.
Oh yeah,
I can't
there's
remember what it's called.
it's called Evolution. Nobody's been people kind of stopped working on it though. There's a channel in our Slack. It's called #Evolution.
I think that's cool because it's super low pressure. If you're just trying to figure out like practice
Yeah,
Git or something, that's a really
it
great
was
place.
it was mainly to give people a chance to like learn how to like fork a repo and make pull requests. And it was I was trying to make it into like a game. Like there was no direction for the the repo. It was just add something, anything, and I just wanted to see where it would go. That's why it's called evolution, because it was just I wanted to see where it would evolve or how it would evolve.
All right. Next one here. What stacks have you used in your different roles and why? Or maybe just what stacks? I don't know.
The why is the easy part because they made me. Um, so at Dev Bootcamp, we learned Ruby Rails. And then my first job, I went into using Python Django. And yeah, I'll talk about that for a second. That was a pretty easy transition. I feel like Ruby and Python are both super readable and not structured the exact same way, but structured very similarly. And so that was like, I thought that was just such a dream. Like I still think that Python Django might be my favorite framework, but that might just be because I know it the best. Going back to the whole JavaScript thing, like JavaScript has kind of been my enemy for a while because I don't know it. And so I don't like what I don't know. Anyway, but that's also part of the reason why I'm excited to like do more tutorials and learn more about apparently Next.js because anyway, the more exposure you get, the stronger you get with it and the more you like it. Okay, and then my most recent job at Edovo, we used Java and a framework called Java Lite, and then some front end we did React.js. Yeah, I feel like, and what I will say actually is like going from language to language doesn't, I feel like the more you language hop, the easier it is to pick up different languages. All of them are sort of doing the same thing. Like not the, I mean, not the frameworks. Well, but they are, but they aren't. But like, I think it's been a really good exercise for me to go from language to language and get to know different ones. I am not a master at any language whatsoever. But I think that part of, I'm going to go on a tangent. Part of like what I like about learning different languages is I think it makes me more marketable for things in the future. I do not like job postings when they're like, you need 4 years experience of Ruby. And they won't even look at me because I haven't done Ruby for 4 years. Oh, I didn't know 4 years was going to be an overlap there. But I think that like companies that value just someone who can go in and understand what the languages and the code is doing is more, I think that like those are places that are more attractive to me than someone who just like wants me to go in first day, like already know the language and the framework and be able to like hit the ground running. That bothers me. Like I feel like you want to hire someone that's more flexible and has more of a background, more of a varied background than someone who just knows like one thing and knows it well. In the long run, I think that makes like stronger coders. I don't remember the question anymore. You guys can talk.
It was just like, what stack have you used in different jobs and why? Sam, do you want to talk about it?
At Lyft, there's a front end like working group, so they kind of like recommend the tools to work on. They don't force you to do it, but it's like you're gonna have a hard time getting help if you choose to use other technologies. So the main technologies were React, TypeScript, and Express in Node.js. But towards last year, they had worked on incorporating Next.js. They built a wrapper around Next.js to make it easy to add like plugins and stuff to work in the Lyft ecosystem. So it was a package called Lyft Service, and we worked on migrating whatever existing apps we had. Before I left, I worked on migrating a couple of our apps to Lyft Service, which was just so a wrapper around Next.js. Before Lyft, I worked a lot with mapping. So even at Lyft, we use Uber's open source libraries, DeckGL and React MapGL. I worked with a lot because I work in the mapping organization, and Uber makes awesome open source tools. So we use that. And I worked at a different mapping company before, Here Technologies, and we use the same thing, DeckGL, React MapGL. When I started, we were using open layers, but then when I started a new project, there was no front end working group at that company. So me and my coworker, we were both front end, and we chose to switch to the Uber libraries just because it was just way better and it was more fun. And we usually do like spikes when we're like trying to think of new technologies to use. So a spike is just like you try it out, and maybe your other team member tries out a different technology when you're trying to decide between a couple different ones. And then we just have a meeting to discuss the pros and cons of what came out of our experiments with the project. So that's a way to decide on technologies when you have to decide on the stack. But other than that, it's mostly React stuff. Before React, I worked with Backbone a lot, and that wasn't a choice I had to make. That was just what was being used. So back in like 2013, 2014, Backbone JS was one of the popular frameworks, along with Angular, I think was popular too. But I never worked with Angular. I worked at 2 different companies where we were using Backbone. But yeah.
Cool.
Oh,
Yeah,
and I also worked at sorry, one more. I worked at Pivotal for a little while, and they use Java Spring, of course, because they made that library. But we use React on the front end. And as far as testing frameworks, I mostly use Jest, and I used to use Enzyme, but I've switched recently to React testing library just because it's better. And Enzyme, it's hard to test hooks and all that kind of stuff. And Cypress is another one that I really like for testing. Okay, go ahead, Brady. Sorry.
Yeah, I haven't been in the position very often where I was asked to decide on a certain stack. So it's kind of like what Jerry was saying, like you start a job, they tell you this is the stack we use, and then you just kind of adapt. But when I was finishing up at Dev Bootcamp back in 2017, our final project, we decided to make an app that would be able to go onto the App Store. So we had to learn Swift. So that was kind of cool. But it was really just because we wanted to be able to get the app up onto the App Store and say that it was up there. Beyond that, it's just been React front end, Ruby back end. And because that was we didn't focus on React at Dev Bootcamp, but because of the Ruby backend, I think that's why Trunk Club and Dev Bootcamp kind of had a little partnership going on. So there had been multiple hires from DBC, and then they knew that those grads kind of knew how to get up and running really quickly. So it was like this self-fulfilling prophecy, or like one feeding the other type thing. That's all. Yeah.
I wanted to add just a couple more things. I forgot about CSS. So we mostly left styled components is what the working group recommends. Again, they try to just pick one just so it's easier. Like in Slack, people can ask for help in a front end channel. It's kind of hard if everybody's like choosing different things, right? So the front end working group they do the spikes and figure out like what technology to use. So CSS and JS. When I first started there, my team was using Emotion, which is very similar to styled components. So we ended up migrating most things over before I left, just to like, because they made that recommendation later after we already built a bunch of stuff with Emotion. But whenever I touched a file, I would just convert it to styled components just to match their recommendation. And it was actually, I liked it a lot better once I learned how to use it better. But other than that, I've used CSS modules, which is fine too. That comes out of the box with Next.js. So if I do Next.js, like when I play around with stuff, I just use CSS modules because then I don't need to add another library, which is a trade-off you have to make, right? Like either add another dependency and have this styled components kind of way of doing things, or just use what comes with the framework or whatever is provided. And CSS modules are good too. So yeah.
That was a lot. Cool. So next question, have you been asked to do informational interviews? And if so, how do you like the experience? Do you have any recommendations for doing them?
You guys, what's an informational interview?
I think it's like, so if a recruiter is interested in talking to you, I feel like it's that first part where it's not code related. It's just like them getting to know you, you getting to know the company. That's what I would consider an informational interview.
Cool. That's I feel like that's fairly typical for first round interviews, just talking to a recruiter. And those are fine. I think I feel like those are mostly just to make sure you're I don't want to say things that sound offensive, but make sure you're not crazy and make sure you're normal and make sure you're interested legitimately in the job and you've done a little bit of like prep work. Yeah, that's just sort of like putting your best foot forward to like show that you're interested in the job, which is fine. Like I'll really do is like talk to them and tell the same spiel that I gave at the beginning of this. Like, this is what my background is, and this is how I got into coding, and this is why I like doing it. And yeah, I feel like those are not the interviews that scare me at all. The interviews that scare me later are the technical ones.
And actually, I'm wrong. I'm reading
Oh,
some
really?
of the comments. Yeah, it's the when you like reach out to someone who works at the, or when you get to talk to someone who works at the company type thing.
Oh, no, I've never done that.
Do you guys mind if I clarify what an informational interview is?
Please do.
Okay. Let's say, for example, you want to work at Netflix as a coder and you happen to know somebody that works at Netflix and you say, hey, whomever that person is, can I have an interview with you where I just ask you, what's the work life like there? What is it like to work there? Would love to get some insider information of what life would be like working at whatever company. And that's it. It's very casual.
Got it. I feel like I've definitely had, I would call those more like networking meetings, but whatever we're going to call them, I've definitely done that with people. I'm going to say the same sort of thing though. Like it's mostly, I don't really have anything. I'm going to back off of this one because I don't think I have much to contribute to that would be helpful to say out loud right now. If I think of something, I'll pipe up, but you guys can go.
Okay, yeah, and I'm going back to read the question again now that I have more context. Sorry. Have you been asked to do the informational interviews, and how do you like the experience? So like, I'm assuming this is now that we have jobs, have people reached out to us? And yeah, people have reached out to me, and it always depends on like how much other stuff I have going on in the rest of my life, but in general I love to do them. I really appreciated when people were able to take time out of their day when I was looking for a job and reached out for that kind of networking. And then once I did have a job and people would reach out to me, it's always like, because we have a referral program. So if this person seems like a good fit at all, I am always happy to refer people. And that would just be money in my pocket. So, and then I'm always happy when I can help somebody get a job. Like there's the, I don't know, the good feeling that comes with that, because I was just appreciative of anyone who was able to try to help me when I was looking for my job.
Yeah, I'm usually happy to do it as long as I'm not busy. I'd be pre-COVID times. Lyft used to have free lunch and dinner, so sometimes if people are in the area, I would just tell them they can come join me for lunch. Then they can come check out the office, and we could like chat. So I did that a few times. People come over to dinner, like, and then we just chat about working at Lyft. I referred one of them, and they actually got hired. So I got $5,000 from, or before taxes, I got $5,000 from that referral. And yeah, he was awesome. Like it wasn't, I didn't know him. It was a friend of an acquaintance. Somebody, I took a nano degree from Udacity. Somebody that I knew from the Slack, from that Udacity nano degree, worked with that person at Facebook, and that person had gone to Hack Reactor. So we had like these weird like connections. Like I knew this person from Udacity, and then also the person who came for the informational interview or just to have dinner, we had coding boot camp like in connection. Like they went to Hack Reactor, I went to their boot camp, so we talked about that kind of stuff too. So yeah, and then now sometimes it depends. Like sometimes, like fresh out of college, people will ask me when I was working at Lyft. But I would, if that was the case, that's really hard to get into Lyft. So I would just make other recommendations, because the way to do it as like a fresh out of college person is it's easier to do an internship at Lyft and then get hired as a full-time, or if you're a non-traditional background, do the apprenticeship, and that's how you get your foot in the door, and it's much easier to get into the company that way. Otherwise, it's really hard to get into Lyft. So if I like thought it would be like really hard, I would just think like my time is valuable too, you know. So I would recommend that they maybe go look into working at like a smaller startup in the transportation like space. That way you go and do that first for a couple years, and then you have a better shot of like getting into Lyft. So It depends on the situation. I like try to see like if it's worth it to like jump on a call with them for 30 minutes or not. Like after we started this meetup, I like sometimes I just tell people to come here because it's easier to do things in a group. It's not super scalable if I just have informational interviews with every single person that asks me. So yeah, it just depends.
All right. So when you were in your boot camp, how did you overcome getting stuck on a problem or learning a new language? Do you have any tips to get back on track and not feeling defeated?
I felt super defeated in boot camp. So there's 3 phases in Dev Bootcamp: phase 0, 1, and 2. Oh, wait, I guess there is 4 because there's phase 3. 0 index, everyone. And for 1, 2, and 3, you're on site, and for 1 and 2, I had to repeat both because, again, slow learner. And so I feel like I spent a lot of my time just super feeling defeated. Brady, you said earlier you got to get comfortable with being uncomfortable, and like that is like between like getting comfortable being uncomfortable and then like just learning how to learn. Those are the things that like I walked away from Dev Bootcamp with. But it helps to talk to other people. Number one, it's really hard to ask for help. I felt like that was really tough because I never wanted anyone to think that I was stupid. So it's really hard to ask for help, but asking for help is super important, and asking from different people so that you hear things being explained in a different way is really important because and I'm super visual, so just finding the right way to work through a problem. And the best way for me to figure out how to work through a problem is to do it myself. Like I need hands-on keyboard. Like we can whiteboard it all we want, and I do want someone to talk it through with me, but I like need to be able to do it myself. Yeah, I feel like, and that's a hard problem. Like that's just going to be always a problem, is like feeling defeated and getting stuck. Yeah, I don't know if you guys have anything to add.
Yeah, I think for me, it was a lot of working with other people, which I felt like until, yeah, I can get into the trap of feeling like, well, I'm not really learning if I'm working with other people and I'm doing it and I'm not figuring it out all on my own. And I think at my job, I've gotten better at recognizing that that's not true. Like the more that I'm working with other people, then I can go back and realize that I'm able to do a lot more on my own. And yeah, getting back on track and not feeling defeated. I think sometimes I talk a lot about like going back and recognizing what it is you have learned and where you've come from, because it's really, really easy for us all to compare ourselves to that one person who's like the star and doing really, really well. But chances are, if you've been consistent in practicing, you're learning a whole lot. And so like stop and remember to take a look at where you've come from. And that helped me get back on track. And also just like, also at work, it took me until being at work to recognize how frequently other people are feeling that same way. And it was so comforting to hear these, like, I still picture them as like geniuses, and they would be talking to each other and one person be like, I think I understood some of the words that you said in that sentence. And like, they didn't understand everything about everything either. And that started to make it okay for me to not know everything about everything. And I really respected a coworker joined one of my teams, and she had experience in a different part of the company, and she had like she apologized a couple of times, but when she would ask some of the questions that she asked, it was like, I'm so sorry, I don't know this. But from my perspective, I recognized there's no way that you would have known the answer to that question. It was my fault for not telling you. And I think all of those things combined have made it easier for me to just like put myself out there, let people know, hey, I have no idea what's going on, ask questions, and feel okay about all of that. Okay, well, next question then. How did you fight against imposter syndrome during the job search process if you feel like you didn't learn very quickly during the boot camp?
So imposter syndrome also doesn't go away. It's here right now. um, uh, that was really tough. Like I was told like I would not be ready for a junior position when I got out of boot camp. Like I was told that. And that actually just lit a fire under my ass. And I was like, screw that. Like I'm gonna figure this out, which is why I did the schmoozing I did and use my personality. And also, I mean, it's not like I didn't have skills, but how do you fight imposter syndrome? Like that's such a big question. I'm thinking, guys, like no one knows what they're doing. I feel like my default is just being like brutally honest about not knowing what I don't know. And I just, right, like telling the people during the interview, I'm like, this is my worst nightmare. I hate this right now, but let's do this. Like, I'd like to do this. Let's continue doing this. Like, I think I just default to just being honest and letting people know where I'm at emotionally. And usually people respond to that because they'll be like, well, I'm not trying to freak you out, right? Like people, like just let them know how you're feeling and don't try to like put up a wall. You don't have to know everything. It takes a long time to learn that. I'm gonna stop talking there. I feel like I could talk about that for forever, but I'd just be going in circles. Like you're always gonna have imposter syndrome. I'm sorry, you will. But I think it's also a healthy, actually, I think it's a super healthy thing to have because like it keeps you humble and it keeps you knowing that you don't know everything. And like the people you come across who think that they do know everything are more difficult to work with than I think people who experience imposter syndrome. Yeah, it's a strength, you guys. Let's turn it around.
Yeah, nobody knows everything. There's too much to know. That's why we got Google. We just ask Google questions.
I think it's so impressive though, like I think everyone already has that pressure on themselves that like maybe I don't know enough, and then to be told that from anybody. Like I went through a pretty bad interview before I got a job and was basically told the same. And my response was basically to stop applying. And like I think it's so impressive that it lit a fire and you're like, nope, I'm totally leaning into this and I'm gonna get a job really fast. Like that is awesome. All right.
Thanks. Everyone's different.
I got there eventually, I guess, but
You did.
Okay, so next question here is, I get the most anxiety when doing tech assessments. Any advice on how to manage this?
It's this, I feel like it's this, I'm going to repeat the same stuff I've been saying. Just be as open as you can about how you're, I guess like I just like to tell people how I'm feeling. So tell people how you're feeling because they relate to that. And then, but if you're not that kind of person, that's cool too. But just talk through the problem. Let them know what you know. Technical assessments. Like the most recent interview I had, we had to do like a whiteboarding thing where it was like, hey, we have this feature. What was it? It was like, oh, it was making like a bit.ly. It was like making a shorter URL for a URL. And it's like, what would we need for this? And it was like, I was just like, I just like stopped and I was like, I'm having a really hard time starting with this problem at all. And just like verbalize that you're having a hard time starting with that. And they're like, okay. They're like, if it's a RESTful API, what kind of calls would we need? Like, they'll help you. It's not like they're just going to leave you high and dry. And if they do, then you don't want to work there anyway, because it's like, and it's, I feel like that's such a luxury though, right? Like if you're trying to get your first job, it does not feel like a luxury. You do not have the luxury of like being able to interview them as much as they're interviewing you. I feel like you're just like desperate and you want to get that first job, and so you're trying to impress people as much as you can. And I wish that I could go back and tell myself like, don't stress out about this one. Like I know I'm down a rabbit hole here, but like there were some interviews where I left feeling totally down about myself and terrible because like I didn't answer the questions they wanted the way that they wanted me to answer them. But that doesn't mean that I wouldn't have been good for the job. But that's not what they wanted. Like they weren't looking for me. They were looking for someone else. Yeah. So like if and when you get rejected, it's more about like, it actually wasn't a good fit. And it's not because you're not a good programmer, and it's not because you wouldn't be able to do a good job. It's just that like that wasn't your spot. It sounds like I'm talking about destiny and fate, and maybe I am, but yeah, it's important to just do your best. We're back to this. It was technical. How do you do about technical stuff? Just do your best, put your best foot forward, and if it's the right fit, it'll be the right fit.
Also, just want to add, it helps to just practice a lot, like with other people, because then it's more similar to what you're going through. That's why Pramp is good, because not only are you practicing with other people, you're practicing with a stranger, which I get anxiety when I do Pramp too. I haven't done it in a long time, but I think every time I did a Pramp interview, I was like nervous when I did it. Like you're doing it with a stranger, even though it's not a real interview, I would still get nervous. But it helps to practice because then you get more familiar with the process. But other than that, I bombed a lot of interviews in my in all my interviews I've done. I bombed super hard when I interviewed at Uber a long time ago. So I just turn it into a learning experience when like I'm totally bombing. I just try to get the interviewers to teach me stuff. That way I get a free class. That's what I think of it. I think of it as like a free like class instead of an interview, because I know I'm not going to get the job anyways. I might as well learn something from somebody that's better than me. So that's just a couple of my tips.
Awesome. Thank you both. So next up, when it comes to frameworks like Rails, for instance, how much knowledge is enough to say you have knowledge?
I think you just tell them what you know. How much is enough? Like, just if you have experience in it, just let people know what your experience was. Like, don't try to misrepresent yourself, I guess is all I'll say. Like, you know what you know, and that's okay, and you'll learn the rest. I was on the other side of the table interviewing someone a while ago, and they were like, yeah, I know AWS. And it's like, okay, that's a lot. Like, what do you know? And they're like, all of it. And I'm like, no, you don't. Like, just tell me what you know, right? So, and that like, I was like, why? Like, just tell me just tell them what you know. That's all I would say. Like, I don't know what enough would be. It also just depends on like how much. I think that they would want to know more that you understand like how like MVC framework works or something, right? Like, if they're asking you really specific questions about like strong params or something, like, I mean, maybe you should probably know that, but like, just represent yourself for what you know. And if it's enough for that position, it'll be enough. I know that's not, God, I sound so wishy-washy, but like, just tell them what you know.
I mean, that is a hard question.
Yeah. And I think that's the whole problem with tech interviews. Like, some places have more resources to devote to teaching people, and some places don't. And so every place will be looking for something different. And so the best way to figure out if like it's hard to describe what they think enough is, and it's hard for you to say like exactly where you're at. So that's where we come to this like strange interview process that is not the ideal scenario, but that's I guess what happens.
I mean, as long as you could build like an app with it, right? Then I would put it on my resume. Like, can you build a to-do app with Rails from scratch? Then I put Rails on my resume, or Express or whatever. Next.js.
All right.
Yeah, I posted that question, and the reason, like, one of the examples I was thinking of was like, you know, like Git, and say, you know, I do a lot of just, you know, Git and the basic stuff, your basic local and GitHub, and your maybe you do a little bit of branching and your, you know, your statuses and you're pushing and this and that, but it's like nothing super complex. So I mean, I guess that's enough to put, yeah, I'm comfortable enough with Git to do the basics, but I'm not
That's
doing
all I
all
do.
those super
That's all I do.
complicated, you know.
I'm always Googling how to get, like,
Yeah,
there's a lot of complicated stuff and I don't know any of it by heart. That's why Google's there.
there's so much obscure Git stuff out there. So it's like, yeah, I just put it on there. Yeah, I'm good enough with Git, but I didn't know whether that would be considered misleading or just whatever, you know.
I think
Because
as
like
long
a lot
as
of
you
people,
can,
this is going to be my first experience with this stuff. So
yeah,
I think like
I don't think they're gonna quiz you on Git if you put it on there. As long as you can like push code and pull code.
yeah, I don't expect I would expect a quiz on it, but just as a general, you know, guideline for what to include as far as, you know.
I feel like experience versus proficiency is a good way to like break that up too. Like, and I think saying that you have experience in something, as long as you can just provide an answer for what your experience is, like put it on there. Like, this is what I did. Don't undersell yourself. Like, if you did a thing, be proud that you did the thing, even if it wasn't like an overly complicated thing. I also still only know very basic Git commands, and I have to Google all of that too.
Yeah, you mostly only use the same commands in Git, like, and then you just Google Stack
I feel
Overflow.
like if I have to look something complicated up, it means I screwed something up.
You mostly need just push, pull.
We're
reset,
all we do is
out.
Google all day. All we're doing is Googling and Stack Overflowing. That's all.
Yeah, or you just ask your coworker, how do you do this?
I have learned one of my favorite takeaways in Git, if you're like trying to merge or trying to rebase or something and you get into this unexpectedly complicated territory, like try to back away from what you were doing and make a copy of your branch and then do the thing that you're going to try to do on the copy. That's my favorite takeaway that I learned in the past 12 months.
Yeah.
All right.
And then
sorry, go ahead.
Don't get too out of sync with master. That's how you avoid getting into situations like that. Just make your pull requests small. Main. Sorry, my bad.
How many people have been running into that problem when you try to push to GitHub and it's your local goes to main and your GitHub goes to main and your local defaults to master.
Alrighty. Jerry, do you want to do one more since we're almost at time?
Sure.
All right. This one is, did your new job give you a whiteboard problem? Is that expected for a junior job?
Yeah, I touched on it a little bit. So we did do like a whiteboard problem with the small URL thing. And it was weird. It's weird doing it remotely, guys, because it wasn't like I'm not whiteboarding. I was basically just talking, and one of the senior devs I was interviewing with was just writing down everything I was saying, and like, these are the tables we would need, and this is what would go on in the get in the post methods. I don't know. I don't think I really. What did I have to do as a junior? I don't know what I did as a junior. I don't think I actually had to ever do any whiteboarding. I just had to do like algorithmic, technical, let's talk through this specific problem. And it wasn't really like, I guess that is sort of whiteboarding. I separate them into two different things. It's like, let's talk through this like algorithm, and then like, let's like talk through this feature, and it's more of like database design and like what goes into different methods. Do one of you guys have different experience on what like whiteboarding looks like for juniors? I know that they prepared us for it in Dev Bootcamp, and I knew I was always terrified of doing it. I'm still terrified of doing it now because again, imposter syndrome. But
I think like binary search kind of stuff, like I was saying before, is might be common. I think binary search is really common. At least it used to be. I don't know if it still is. But I don't know. Just and like stuff I was mentioning before, like anagrams and palindrome and stuff like that. I don't know. Those seem pretty common. What about you, Brady?
So I know at least like we've been trying to find more inclusive ways of hiring for a while. And so when I was starting, I know everyone was making a point to like, you don't have to do anything on the whiteboard. They felt like that was maybe not necessarily the best way to hire someone who was not going to be sitting around from day to day working at a whiteboard on big problems at like a junior level at least. So I did not really have a whiteboarding problem. I had an algorithm, like a really simple algorithm that I worked on, like I pair programmed with somebody, where we like it was dealing with arrays. So it was a very simple problem compared to what I was afraid I was going to run into. And there were a bunch of like edge case scenarios that I didn't think through as a junior, but we talked it through, and it went okay. The closest I got to whiteboarding was talking about, there was like a take-home app portion, and I didn't get as far as I wanted to because it was supposed to be like a 4-hour time limit, I think. So then like trying to talk about how I would have done more became complicated without actually just drawing it out. So they were trying to avoid that scenario, but at some point, like it's a concept for a reason, because drawing things out, writing things ends up being less complicated than just talking about it. I think maybe we could turn off the recording, and if people want to hang around, we can talk a little bit. I don't know what your day looks like, Jerry, so you are welcome to stay around. We'd love to talk to you more, but I know you've just spent a lot of your time donating to us, so we appreciate that.
no, I'm down. I'm down to hang out.
Awesome.
Yeah, thanks for spending your Saturday with us.
Thanks for having me. This was really cool.